Well, I'm back. I've been in Italy with my other half. Basically, since she got ignored for 5 months, we kind of needed some time together. So went and met the Pope, tried to look sexy in Italy, and also ate a lot of ice cream. I've got a little bit of a different video to do today. Obviously, building a race car and racing a race car, you need to buy a helmet. I used to have an Arai GP5, I think it was. It was quite old, it needed to go. So I've gone out and bought another one. But before I did that, I went and did some research on different helmets, standards, and I want to break down what they are and what they mean. So I'm going to do that for you today. So if you're the type of person who thinks that a $10 head buys a $10 helmet, can you go and slap yourself? Back in the 1970s, there probably was a correlation between money spent on a helmet and the quality of it, as per safety. But that really isn't the case anymore, I don't believe. I think the differences in helmets are beyond safety. There are other things like quality of ventilation, intercom and everything. Let me give you an example. This is not a motorsport example, but let me give you an example. So this is from the Sharp website. This is a UK testing standard. They basically take helmets from off the shelf in the marketplace and they test them. So this, you can see, is the Shock Sniper. Now, I actually own this helmet. It cost me £35. And you can see that, it's very good on the frontal and upper impact zones, but it's not so good at the side impact. So it only got 3 stars. But that's pretty good for a £30 helmet. However, let's have a look at this Arai Renegade 5, exactly the same. That Arai Renegade 5 is a £500 helmet. So, the idea that you're going to get a more safe helmet because you spent more money is not necessarily true. I think that link has truly been broken, and helmet testing standards really demonstrate that. I know that's very rough and ready and not particularly scientific, but actual helmets that have been tested and are exactly the same and wildly different in price. So if you look at the motorsport regulations, it's currently 2022. So we're going to look at the 2022 helmet regulations from the Blue Book. And you see that these are the list of helmets that are currently usable. And that is, I'll start with the Snell ones. You've got the Snell SAH 2010 and the Snell SA 2010. Now, they're not going to be valid after 2023. So the end of next year, you'll have to replace them. You've also got the Snell SA 2015. That won't be valid after 2026. You've got the Snell SA 2020. And then you've got the FIA standards, and you've got the FIA 8860 2010. You've got the FIA 8859 2015, and the FIA 8860 2018, and the FIA 8860 2018 ABP. So let's discuss what those standards are, what they mean, so you can make a better buying decision if you're in a position to buy a new helmet. There's a lot of technical waffle about to happen, so please be forewarned. What I've done is I've done a summary at the end of the video, and there'll be a link in the description to the summary. So if you're really not interested in all the technical waffle and you just want the meat and potatoes, then just go to the summary and it will tell you what you need to know. So the Snell standard is an American standard, but it is influential on standards for motorsport. So what does Snell SA mean? It means special application, but it basically means circuit use or motorsport use. So the main difference between motorcycle, karting and SA, circuit racing helmets, is the flammability test. That's pretty much it. They're pretty much the same except for that. And also the special application SA standard allows for a narrower field of view, whereas a motorcycle helmet, you're going to have a wider field of view. So that's actually not bad if you're racing cars, because you want to have a smaller space, so you've got a stronger helmet and more protection for your head. You don't really need that wide up and down visual ability. So you get a Snell SA 2010, for example. If it's an M, it's a motorcycle helmet, so I guess they couldn't use M for motorsport, so an M 2010 is a motorcycle standard, and you've got K as well for karting. So the current standards that you can use are Snell SA 2010 and SAH 2010. Now the difference between SA and SAH is the H means that it's actually being tested for head restraint interaction as well. So if you've got an SA 2010, it's probably time to you know, stop using that because it's not been tested for head restraints. The Snell SA 2015 has, and so has the 2020. So there's three standards we've got here for SA. We've got 2010, 2015 and 2020. So what is really the difference? Well, 2010 and 2015, when it comes to impact testing, basically they sort of rejigged the way they test. They also introduced a low velocity test, but there's really not a massive amount of difference in impact testing. They do test for you know, a peak. So 2010 allows a 285G peak, 2015 allows a 300G peak, and 2020 also allows for a 300G peak. But bear in mind that if you have a 50G impact on your head, you're probably not going to have a concussion. But if you have an 85G impact, you're almost certainly going to have a concussion. So, you know, when we're getting up to sort of hundreds of G, you can expect to get a head injury. But any helmet that is going to test and your head is going to see a 300G impact or greater is going to be an instant rejection under Snell testing standards. Hello, it's Editor Alex from The Next Day. I've had another quick look at these 2010, 2015, 2020 Snell impact standards, and there is a slight difference between them. Generally, 2015 is higher speed than 2010, and also 2020 is higher speed than 2015. But interestingly, the 2015 and 2020 standards actually allow for higher G loads than 2010. But the 2015 and 2020 also introduce low velocity impact test and also a low lateral impact test. A low velocity impact test is fairly self-explanatory, but the lateral impact test is basically where you've got the head moving through the helmet and you've also got the intrusion of the side structure as well, coming towards the head. So it's a more complicated test. Actually, for 2015 and 2020, as I mentioned, they allow for higher G loads. Also, they test at higher velocities as well, compared to 2010, but maybe that's a result of Snell recognising that it is harder to make a helmet to take higher speed impacts when you also account for low lateral tests and low velocity tests. So that's impact testing. They also test for positional stability, that i.e. is it going to stay on your head? And so they sort of test from the chin strap and they see if it can be pulled off the fake head that they've got. And what they do is they basically drop a 4 kilogram weight on the chin with the helmet upside down and see if that will pull the helmet off the virtual head. So 4 kilogram weight from 0.6 meters is dropped, and that's the test. So the differences between SA 2010, 2015, 2020 is nothing. They have exactly the same test. There's also the dynamic retention test, which is basically testing the strap. What they do is they add a 23 kilogram load to the strap, and then they remove that load and then drop a 38 kilogram weight onto that strap as well. And they repeat that test multiple times. So obviously the strap can't be mechanically damaged by that, and also the strap can't stretch more than 30 millimeters. That test is the same across 2010, 2015 and 2020. Next is the chin bar deflection test. They basically drop a 5 kilogram weight on the chin bar, and if it deflects more than 60 millimeters, then it's a fail. And again, 2010, 2020 and 2015, they're all the same. Next is the shell penetration test, and they basically take a 3 kilogram point and they drop that from 3 meters. That's the SA 2010 test. And if there's penetration into the shell, that's a fail. The 2015 and 2020 tests are slightly different. They drop a 3 kilogram pointed weight and they make sure the velocity is 7.45 meters per second. But in effect, it's basically the same as dropping from 3 meters. You get the same speed. So it's just a bit more accurate description of the testing procedure in 2015 and on. Next is the face shield penetration. They fire an air rifle in 3 different spots to see if the air rifle bullet will penetrate the face shield. They shoot it at 500 kilometers per hour, and if there's a bump of more than 2.5 millimeters, that's a fail, and if there's penetration, there's also a fail. Again, same standard across 2010, 2015 and 2020. They do a flame resistance test as well, and again it's the same across the board. And then also they do a test for FHR, or frontal head restraint, like a HANS device or something. That's actually tested to an FIA standard 8858-2010. And again, that's the same across the board for 15 and 20, with SA 2010 not being tested at all with FHR. And that's it. So really, there's not a massive amount of difference between them from testing, except maybe the head restraint. Next, let's look at FIA standards, because a lot of people say, oh, they're a lot better being tested at FIA. But actually, when we look in the detail, there's not a lot of difference. Let's go back to the standards as listed in the Blue Book. So we've got FIA 8860-2010, 8859-2015, 8860-2018, and then 2018 ABP. Let's talk about FIA 8860-2018 first. So that's actually a helmet used for international motorsport. So right now, I think anything from international F3 and up must use it. Also WRC, and there's also an 8860-2018 ABP. ABP standing for Advanced Ballistic Protection. Basically gives you a smaller aperture, and also they've tested to, basically fired things at it. It's probably a standard that came out from Massa's accident in F1, if you remember, at the Hungarian Grand Prix. And I've tried to find a standard on the FIA website. They do publish their standards, as do Snell. Links in the description if you want to look at those. But I couldn't find the 2018 standard written up. But I'll go through the differences in a little bit between the 2015, 2010 and the 2018 FIA standards. FIA 8860-2010. That's the oldest standard. It doesn't have any, use by date or anything in the Blue Book. And also, it needs to be mentioned that FIA standards are what you're going to have to use if you're doing any international competition, whereas if you're doing national competition, Snell standards are going to be fine. So basically, 2010 is exactly the same as FIA standard 2004, which I'm not going to look at, except that you have the HANS device or frontal head restraint testing also added. So it's exactly the same, 2004, except they call it Section 7, but it's basically this 8858-2010 test standard for frontal head restraints. Exactly the same as what's written into the Snell standards. That involves a 14 kilonewton test on both of them, a 7 kilonewton test on each one, and then they call it a offset 3.5 kilonewton test on one of the HANS, what they call the HANS sockets. But it's also worth noting that the 2010 standard is also based on Snell SA2000, so a slightly older standard than what we've been looking at, but again it's based on Snell standards, and the FIA have just added a little bit in. Now let's look at 8859-2015, which is probably the kind of helmet you're going to look at. That is based completely off SA 2015. So it's basically it says in the standard SA 2015. If it complies with that, it basically complies with this. But there is one difference. That is that the weight of the helmet is limited to 1,800 grams for a full face helmet, and I think it's 1,600 grams for an open face helmet. But yeah, there's a weight limitation in the FIA 2015 standard, whereas the Snell there isn't, and that's the only difference. It's Snell 2015 with a weight limit. Okay, so now let's look at the 2018. Now, if you're a club racer, this is probably not a helmet you're going to buy. The 2018 FIA 2018 helmets, I mean, they basically the cheapest one I saw was £1,800. I don't think that even included VAT. So you're probably looking at 2-3 grand at least for that kind of helmet. I think my view on helmets is that they really need to be replaceable. And if £2 grand is going to be a difficult thing to replace, then I probably wouldn't buy it. That's certainly my case. But they're worth looking at because the standards are much, much better than the 2015 FIA standards. So I'll give you an example. The impact velocity. So for 2015, the impact velocity is 8.5 meters per second and you must be below 300 G. Whereas for the 2018 standard, the impact velocity is 9.5 meters per second, so 1 meter per second higher, and it must produce less than 275 G. So 25 G less at a higher impact velocity. So in summary, I'm just going to refer to the HANS device test, or the M6 terminal test on the helmet, which is for connecting head restraints. The standard is FIA 8858-2010. I'm just going to refer to that as FHR testing regime. Across almost all the helmets, the FIA FHR standard is applied, except for SA 2010. Now, SA 2010 is a helmet you can still use. I would recommend you replace it as soon as possible because it hasn't been tested for use with HANS devices. And anyhow, after the end of 2023, you won't be able to use that helmet anyway. The SAH is basically the same as SA 2010, but has been tested to the FIA FHR standards. But again, that helmet is not allowed to be used after 2023. SA 2015 again has been tested to FIA FHR standards, and also has the addition compared to 2010 of the low velocity and low lateral impact tests. But that helmet is not allowed to be used after 2026, and the SA 2020 is very similar to SA 2015, but with slightly higher impact velocities on the impact testing. The SA 2020 helmet also has no use by date, so to speak, at the moment. So looking at FIA helmets, the FIA 8860-2010 is basically the same as FIA 2004 standard, which itself is based off SA 2000, so a fairly old standard, but has had the FIA FHR test applied to it, and there's no use by date for that helmet, which is a bit strange because SA 2015 is tested to higher standard, but has a use by date of 2026. So that doesn't make a great deal of sense to me. But anyhow, FIA 8859-2015, which is kind of the helmet you should probably be looking at. It's exactly the same as SA 2015, except there is an 800 gram weight limit, and there's no use by restriction date as yet. And finally, the last 1.5, let's call it, that we have FIA 8860-2018. It is a much better helmet, tested to higher impact speeds, which must also produce lower Gs compared to SA 2015. And there's also the ABP version, which stands for Advanced Ballistic Protection. And that's it. So, I mean, what did I buy? I ended up buying the OMP GP helmet, a GPR helmet. It's probably the cheapest FIA 2015 helmet available. Grand Prix Raceway sell it. I actually got mine from GSM Performance because they had a few and you could go and try them on. I tried a few other helmets on, like the Bell and the Zamp. The Zamp didn't fit me at all. The Bell did, but to be honest, I couldn't really justify the extra expense. It didn't really feel like, you know, hundreds of extra pounds worth of quality, and I think I got mine for about 350 quid. Although I haven't used this one in anger yet, it's fine. I mean, I have an Arai-shaped head, and I thought I'd like to get an Arai, but it's an expensive helmet. And this one fitted really, really well. And obviously it's really important to go and try helmets on and make sure they're comfortable and they fit, because it's going to be a pain if you know, it's not comfortable and doesn't fit right. Unfortunately, with the way retail is, it's very hard to get to stores, and actually, there just aren't any stores open where you can go try lots of motorsport helmets on. So I hope this has not been too much of a ramble. Hopefully it's not too difficult to edit. More race car videos coming soon. Obviously, there's still more work to be done on the car to get it track day ready, which is now the next target. I'll be starting on that this week now, and I'm looking forward to bringing some more videos to you.